What is up, boys and girls? This is Spooky Fridge, coming straight from the league here to give you an intro on Pokemon VGC. VGC is a very competitive format that's coming up. It's the big one by Nintendo, and it's very important. So, getting a kickstart to this channel, I wanted to give a guide right into that, given that we are coming up to everyone's regionals and nationals in the June-July period, at least in Australia. So, who am I? Basically, I'm Spooky Fridge. I've been running a YouTube channel for probably the last 3 months. I've been reasonably inactive recently due to just 3 job changes, which is pretty decent. But I'm back now. I've been acting competitively since January 2014. I've been involved in VGC since May 14. Basically, just got into it right before the regionals. I participated in Sydney regionals and made it to Australian nationals. I've been active throughout the community through Nugget Bridge, Reddit, Smogon. I've been on YouTube, of course, as I said before. Now, getting quickly started, what is VGC? VGC is the Pokemon Video Game Championships. VGC is the sanctioned format that Nintendo and Game Freak sponsor with worldwide tournaments across the area, mostly in America, but most countries actually do get regional tournaments and national tournaments in their major cities, which is very nice. Game Freak actually designs all these broken Pokemon around the VGC metagame. That is why you have things like Mega Kangaskhan and Salamence that are just ridiculously powerful. They are actually designed to be in a 2-on-2 environment, when they are actually very balanced there. While they can be very strong, it's no more than anything an OU is in singles. So that's the main thing to really consider about this. The format consists of both teams containing 6 Pokemon. The challengers then preview each other's teams and then take 4 Pokemon into the battle with them. This goes on a best 2 out of 3 on rounds, and then whoever wins the best 2 out of 3 essentially wins the match, and then they can move on to the next one. Most VGC tournaments do operate on essentially a double elimination, so I can lose one game on my first round and continue to win the entire tournament by just blasting and not losing a single other round, or I could lose my round right before the tournament and I get another go, which is quite handy because it does eliminate things like terrible luck on top of the 2 out of 3 rounds in each match. Unlike Smogon, there are no tiers, but there are still banned Pokemon. There are mostly legendary Pokemon that appear on boxes, but also event Pokemon such as Jirachi, such as Celebi, that sort of thing. Basically, if you had to be in a very specific place to get this species of Pokemon, then you're out of luck. How does this differ from other metagames? Pokemon that were basically very strong in singles and deserve a ban are reasonably power level because, like I said, not a single Mega Kangaskhan actually made the top 16 cut at the World Championships in 2014. The battles are much shorter in the number of turns. In singles, you can extend anywhere between 30 to 100 turns, depending on the tactics used. In VGC, the matches usually can conclude in about 3 turns, but that's pretty rare, and they actually rarely last more than 20 turns, so you've got a very small amount. Say your average you're looking at is about 8 to 10. Almost every Pokemon will be carrying Protect. Leftovers is less viable than a Citrus Berry unless you tend to have a Pokemon that needs to last a bit longer. These would be things like Aegislash or possibly even Gyarados that are hiding behind substitutes. The tactics definitely differ pretty immensely, but we'll go into that very soon. So, basically, in singles, what you're looking at is things like entry hazards phasing, toxic stalling, stat boosting for solid sweeps, switching to minimize damage, and Baton Pass are very viable tactics to the point where certain things like Baton Pass have actually had limitations put on them through the Smogon tier. What you have in VGC is pretty much no limitations on the moves you can use, as there are no more banned moves, and the only banned item is Solju. So, what you have is things like Trick Room, Tailwind, Weather are much more viable. Pranksters are typically a lot more important, whereas a Prankster can't exactly do a gigantic amount in singles, aside from getting really nice burns or setting up Tailwind for something else, possibly for the next 4 turns or so. Pranksters are actually very important in this game, and they're definitely something you definitely cannot underestimate. We also have things like Redirection, such as Rage Power and Follow Me. Definitely that Seijun Park definitely used a lot in his matches in E1 Worlds. You also have things like Sleep Abuse, Evasion Boosting, and a lot of Protection coming through. Now that's basically because, of course, Sleep itself, while Smogon does have a Sleep Clause, so you can never put more than 1 Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field to sleep at any given time. you are absolutely allowed to spam Dark Void with Smeargle throughout the entire VGC team. However, it's a very foreseeable tactic, and if you don't have a counter for it, then you kind of deserve to lose, unfortunately. Evasion boosting is another thing that's reasonably tricky, but you need to just keep that in mind when designing a team. Anyway, what we have now are basically the most commonly used Pokemon here. You'll see a couple of these guys are actually OU or Ubers in the Smogon tier. These are the most commonly used. I find that a lot of this is to do with the psyche behind them as well. So, what you have are the top 6 are Kangaskhan, Landorus, Therian, Talonflame, Sylveon, Aegislash, and Salamence. Now, the Mega Forms for Kangaskhan and Salamence are banned to Ubers. Aegislash is banned to Ubers, leaving 3 OUs as well in Standard Salamence, Talonflame, Sylveon. You also have Bisharp, Rotomwash, Amoonguss, Garchomp, Hydreigon, and Gengar coming up right behind. Mega Gengar is actually making a rather large surge in popularity at the moment. It's possibly to counteract everyone using Mega Kangaskhan. However, there's really nothing else that particularly counteracts. However, it can be used in Perish Trap teams, which is definitely a lot more viable when you're looking in VGC compared to in singles. Now, more commonly used Pokemon, you have things like Politoed and Ludicolo and Breloom. They're things that you definitely need to consider. Politoed setting up weather, of course. Ninetales is definitely a lot less common for Sun, given that Mega Charizard Y is around. You have Metagross, Gardevoir, and Rotom H. Rotom H basically handling anything that already has a water type or anything that has grass weaknesses on their team, because you definitely don't want to maximize on grass weaknesses with people carrying Energy Ball on things like Gengar. At least that's what I did during my regionals. Definitely hurt a lot of Rotoms. You have Gyarados, whose Mega Evolution Sajin Park used to not exactly win the World Championships, given that he didn't use it in the final round. But you have Scizor making a comeback with Bug Bite and Knockoff and Superpower. Gastrodon's legal again. Meowstic has been staying strong since last year in VGC 14. We have Liepard, Milotic, Venusaur, Arcanine, all reasonably bulky attackers. Mienshao giving Fake Out support and Quick Guard. Whimsicott being a prankster. Excadrill and Azumarill are just very strong. Parathorn has the ability to really just demolish any fast fairy types or even fast neutrals to steal, and he also has Power Whip, which of course with Rotomwash wandering around, Parathorn is very strong with his Power Whip. Greninja is still pretty good. I've never seen a particular use for him, but with his new moves like Low Kick and Gunk Shot, I find Physical Greninja to be fairly viable. Scrafty and Hitmontop provide Intimidate support, and they basically, Scrafty also does have Fake Out support and Guard support, so he's able to basically handle a lot of the metagame, just at least for the first turn setup for things like Kangaskhan. Hariyama and Gothitelle, of course, being used by Aaron Cybertron Zhang on his team. He even used them at Worlds, and he came pretty high with them. Togekiss is legal again, basically using it for air/flinches, which basically, it is like a 60% chance of a Fake Out every turn. Tyranitar, of course, staying strong. He has dropped down in usage. I guess it's mainly because of the fairy typing, but he is still staying strong. Raichu, Smeargle, Heatran, and Terrakion have, of course, stuck around. Smeargle being used for that Dark Void spam. Raichu being used essentially as Fake Out support. He also has Lightning Rod, so if you have things like Gyarados on your team or anything that's Time Sword weak to electricity, he does help you a lot with that. Heatran's come back as a very bulky Fire Steel type. He just provides a lot of support, especially against things that are weak to Fairy. And of course we have Terrakion following up. Basically, he does have Defiant, so if any opponents have Intimidate, he does tend to pretty much counteract everything they have. Now, things to take into account when you're building your team for VGC is basically you need to think about how fast you need your team to be. Basically, is this Pokemon going to have trouble if he's slower than this other Pokemon? Do I need to be slower because I'm using Trick Room? Do I need to be faster? Do I need a lot of speed investment or not too much because I'm relying on Tailwind or Icy Wind? And how can I keep this speed in my favor? If my opponent's using a very fast team, can I use Trick Room to turn that into my advantage? Another thing you need to consider is your bulk and offense balance. How powerful are my attacks? Is my team frail to being basically really hurt by common strong attacks like Choice Specs, Hydreigon, Draco Meteor? Am I too bulky to do enough damage? Basically, am I too invested in bulk that my attack suffers for it and I'm unable to get the opponents out before they can get multiple attacks off against me? you really need to think about your typing synergy as well. So for example, running Tyranitar and Bisharp is a terrible idea, basically mainly because that Time Sword fighting weakness. It's actually not horrendous though, because there's a lot worse that could happen. For example, Hyper Voice Sylveon is now very common, so you really don't want to run anything like Scrafty right beside, let's say, Sableye, because the very large weakness that they both have. You need to think about your overall typing defensively as well, and just how good it is against pretty much everything, because there's a lot of attacks that your entire team will be taking. Things like Hyper Voice Sylveon, as I mentioned before, there'll be Surf from Rain users, and of course, there will be Earthquake and Rock Slide from Garchomp and Tyranitar respectively. And you need to definitely double check any major weaknesses. So for example, if I am running Salamence, I can't really afford to have anything else on my team weak against Ice, unless that's fine by me. So for example, if I'm running Salamence, I probably do not want to be running Zapdos too much due to the double rock and double ice weakness, unless it really does just tend to have good synergy and I don't have them out at the same time typically. So basically my last thing I'm going to talk about is a guide to EVs and how they tend to differ in VGC. What you tend to see in Smogon is you tend to see either max speed or max HP, and then max either offense or defense. Typically it's max HP in defense or max HP in offense. If it's a very slow Pokemon, there's no point investing in speed. Sometimes you'll even see a speed creep, which basically, because speed is a stat that having it significantly over your opponent isn't going to help you than having it 1 point over your opponent. Some people invest, for example, 56 speed EVs in Xavalier just to keep them faster than Azumarill. So in VGC it's definitely different because every Pokemon will be taking one attack at any time or another, either due to things like Trick Room, Tailwind, or just not being able to eliminate both Pokemon at the exact same time on your opponent's side, which is not something you're going to do very often. What you'd typically be looking at, and what I'll show you very quickly, is how I basically designed my VGC Tyranitar that last year. So to put this in perspective, I had him on the same team as a Mawile and a Garchomp. So looking at him, here's T-Tar. I kept Sandstream on because it had good synergy with my team, and I kept Mawile and Garchomp reasonably strong on the especially defensive side. I then gave him Weakness Policy. I kept the nature quiet so he'd be slower, so any other Tyranitar that potentially ran any sort of move, particularly like even Aqua Tail, just in case, if he's slower, that means that he can actually activate the weakness policy against slower threats, because he will typically survive, because what most VGC Tyranitars were running during VGC 14 was essentially max speed and max special attack, or max speed and max physical attack with a Choice Scarf. What this Tyranitar I decided to do was run 252 HP and just enough special attack EVs to attack us to eliminate a Ray-Rizzo style Ferrothorn with a bit more special defense investment than standard, with a single Fire Blast. And then it will also, after the trigger of the weakness policy, it'll be able to eliminate Mega Mawile with a Fire Blast, any special variant of Garchomp with an Ice Beam, of course. It'll be able to take out any Salamence with a Rock Slide after triggering that, and that is good because most Salamences were carrying Hydro Pump at the time, usually with Choice Scarf or Choice Specs. And then, of course, I ran Protect as well, because sometimes I don't want to trigger that. However, when you consider team synergy, basically Garchomp got a free special defense investment just through the Sandstorm itself being on the field. Opponents' Focus Sashes were null and void. And if I really needed to, Garchomp could actually Earthquake the... Garchomp could Earthquake and basically hit the entire field, including my Tyranitar for super effective damage, which would then trigger Weakness Policy. I did keep him slow because the rest of my team was reasonably fast, except for Mawile, and Trick Room definitely benefited me. If my opponent decided to set that up, I could switch around to my Mega Mawile and my Tyranitar. So, basically, that's what I'm going to finish on with my guide today. But basically, what's next is I'm going to be having team-making guides, battle analysis, team analysis, and individual Pokemon analyses. Basically, throughout VGC, I will also be looking at Smogon, OU, and UU, but it's probably going to be less and less until VGC comes to an end around August, September. So, hope to see you guys soon. This has been The League, and this has been Spooky Fridge. Peace.